Let's get started. It's going to be a really fantastic webinar today, and welcome to Global Radio Ideas Webinar, season number 5, episode number 2. My name is Ken Benson from the P1 Media Group, and joining us always from Stuttgart, Germany. Welcome back, my friend and co-host, Andy Sanneman.
Yeah, he just got out of jail.
Exactly, that's me. So nice to meet you guys. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. We're super excited about today's. I mean, we had so many great radio people on, and it's an honor doing this the last 5 years, Ken, together with you. But today, I think we're chatting to somebody really special, somebody people would call the radio GOAT. So the chat box is activated. Let us know where you're watching. You already do, so that's fine. If you have questions, please type it in now or later during the show. Our guest will answer your questions. Maybe later if we have enough time. So
maybe not.
Maybe not.
Well, our guest today doesn't need an introduction, but it'd be criminal of us not to share some of his accomplishments and contributions to radio, not only in the U.S., but the influence he's had around the world. Best known, I would say, for launching the iconic Z100 in New York and taking it from worst to first in 1983. And a couple years ago, many of you probably have seen it. He produced a fantastic documentary about this infamous launch. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you get your, $13, $14 out and get on Apple TV or Amazon Prime and watch it, because it's a great piece of work. He's also responsible for creating the Morning Zoo concept, which was widely duplicated and replicated around the world. First did it at Q105 in Tampa, which was another amazing radio station before Scott brought it to New York. Many of you probably don't know all the markets and stations he's worked at, so we'll knock some off here. Mobile, Alabama, Memphis, Tennessee, Nashville, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Tampa, Los Angeles, and 3 iconic stations in New York, including Z100, WPLJ, and WCBS-FM. And he was even an original VJ for VH1. In 2000, there was an American Trade magazine that named him the PD of the Century. And he's also been inducted in the National Association of Broadcasters Hall of Fame, the National Radio Hall of Fame, and was named Network Syndicated Radio Personality of the Year back in 2010, again by the NAB, and a Marconi Radio Award for that. So we're thrilled to have a true radio GOAT today. Ladies and gentlemen, let me formally introduce Scott Shannon.
Thank you very much, Ken, and thank you, Andy. It's a pleasure to be here today. I've never, ever, I've done a lot of things, but I've never done a webinar. So I guess this is it, huh?
First time for everything.
Yeah.
Exactly. So from worst to first. So Scott, thanks for being here. Before we jump into up close and personal with you, obviously, let's begin. And this is my favorite part of the show. I can't sign off after this, but this is my favorite. So let's begin by sharing something we don't know about you.
I'm pretty much an open book. I started out in radio, and I didn't have a plan B. That's all I wanted to do. So there's not a lot of stuff, I think I actually, other than radio, the only other thing I thought about was the Major League Baseball. I was a baseball player when I was a kid, and I loved it. I didn't pitch. I was a center fielder, and I loved to run. And I really like being in the field more than hitting, although I hit pretty well. I hit over 300 several times, and played American Legion. I didn't play Little League. I played American Legion baseball. And then I figured out as I got a little bit older, I wasn't going to be in the major leagues. So I decided I better go the other way. And that's when I fell in love with radio. I fell in love with music first. I discovered rock and roll. My next door neighbor had a big sister, and she had one of those little boxes with a handle on it with all the 45s in there. Some of you people have been around a while may understand what that is, but it was your lifeblood at the time, because that box had all your favorite songs in there. And what is this? This is all 45 records, and I really loved it. I started a collection, and that was it. And then I figured out you could hear the new songs on the radio, And that's when my whole life blew up. It was like a curtain on a stage just opened up, and there was radio. And I said, "Holy crap, this is for me." And that was the end of the story, man. That's where I was headed, and no plan B. Period.
Well, let's get to the worst to first story, but we're going to start with a quick video here before we get into it. So roll the tape, please.
Signing on the air, this is the new Z100.
New York City was an impossibly saturated media market.
That was the dream. Hear your song coming out of the radio.
And it was really like this communal experience.
I didn't like New York radio at the time. It was uninspiring, and it was ready for a takeover.
And then came Scott Shannon.
Live from the Penthouse Studio, Flamethrower.
Scott came in not knowing anything about New York City.
They started at the very bottom of the barrel.
We were in last effing place. We suck.
I almost fell out of my chair. No one ever says you're doing poorly in radio.
We're going from worst to first. We need your help.
We recruited the audience to build our audience.
Z100 became the biggest thing in New York radio.
From the top of the Empire State Building.
Everybody broadcast from the top of the Empire State Building.
That is Scott's marketing genius.
The reach of Z100 was felt from coast to coast.
Made me feel like I had the freedom to do really experimental projects.
Z100 was a renaissance musical culture in the city.
Mr. James Brown! Ow!
Z100.
Wait a second. Did Scott Shannon create Z100?
That's why I'm doing the movie now. Boom, and you're in it.
Holy shit.
Wow. Yeah, well, let's talk about worst to first. The true story of Z100 New York. Now we can kill that audio. Perfect. Hey, Robbie. Yeah. Well, let's talk worst first, right? One of the most incredible success stories in radio ever. And you chronicled it in this documentary you did a couple years ago. And then just in the last couple months, Fast Company magazine published a story about the film, which you shared with me. And the author said, quote, Scott, startups in all industries, even if their CEOs and staffers don't understand what radio is, why it exists, or how it works, it would be wise to embrace Z100's revolutionary roadmap to bolster their own worst to first journeys. So, Scott, 41 years later, what do you make of that?
Geez, 41 years later. Thank God. I think that more people, I was kind of surprised that more people didn't catch on to the intricacies or the elements that we utilized in doing that. It was, as one of our people from the morning show, John Bell, said, I believe, or was it Gary Fisher, one of the two, said, that was the first time anybody really had a something that break out like that, like the internet comes out and takes over. It went viral. That was the word, and it happened so fast. And I think that the same thing happens with different products on the market. It goes viral. When the pair of shoes comes out that somebody likes, a company makes them, and all of a sudden the word gets around. Nothing moves faster. I don't care how much money you spend on an advertising campaign. Nothing is more important than word of mouth. And that's what happened. We took the audience that we had and used them as the advertising campaign. You saw the quick flash up there. We giving away $30,000. We didn't give away jack shit when we first started. We didn't have anything. And we made a big deal. Look, we don't have a weatherman here. We don't have a news person. We just need you to tell people that we're here. We don't have a budget for advertising. We actually went on the air and we had a homemade signs, and we begged people to tell everybody else and put a little sign up. We don't have any stickers, so you're going to have to make your own damn sticker and put it in the back of your car, or take a sheet and spray paint something up there, Z100 hanging out your window. And people did it. And it was just bold and simple. We were so different from everything else out there, and we talked about it. And as Jim Kerr mentioned, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of stations transmit from the top of the Empire State Building, but no one ever mentioned it until we said, broadcasting from the top of the Empire State Building. People go, holy crap, I didn't know that. And you have to point out your positives. You can't convince people to listen just because you have your logo up there. You have to enlarge the positive ways you're going to affect their lives. I remember a friend of mine told me that a person in the radio business told me that he loved to listen to the morning show because by the time he got in from Connecticut, he knew everything that was going on, good and bad and everything else. We talked about everything. We didn't have a particular style of topics in the morning. Whatever popped into my head or Ross's head, when my partner at the time, we talked about it. And I think the other thing that was important, that I had a plan. And you can just about accomplish anything you want if you have a solid plan and you know what you're going to do and where you're going to go with it. And we did. We knew exactly that we were not going to try to affect the 5 boroughs because they had too many distractions and too much going on. I had a map in my office, and it had the 5 big map, huge map on the wall, and the yellow part of it was the 5 boroughs. Now, keep in mind, I never lived in New York. I'd only been there a couple of times in my life. I knew not a thing about the people or what the heritage was. And, a lot of people, well, we're very local. Nobody gave a crap if we were local or not. We were Z100. And what I did was I looked at, you had Long Island over here with, probably, I'd say 8-9 million people at the time. Then you had New Jersey with another 10 million people. And then you had Connecticut and Westchester County there. Those were not the yellow things on the map. But we didn't go big time. We didn't talk about the nightclubs and everything else in New York. We talked about Long Island, Westchester County and New Jersey. That's what we talked about. When we didn't try to be that local. If somebody was from there, we put them on. So, we did have a plan, although it didn't sound like it.
So a couple takeaways: a plan, word of mouth, bold and simple.
Bold and simple. I'm a big KISS guy. Keep it simple, stupid. And if you just kind of like get the important things highlighted, make the important things important in your mission. It's that simple. I think one of the advantages that I had is I grew up a fanboy. I was a fanboy. I listened to different radio stations. I listened to different personalities. I figured out I could tell which ones were going to be popular just by listening. If I liked it, it usually became popular. And that was, I don't know if it was a gift or whatever, maybe a natural ability. I could figure out which TV shows. Maybe a year or two ago, I was watching ABC News. They were at that time in last place. And I saw this guy the first night. It wasn't the first night he was on, but the first couple of weeks, a guy named David Muir. And when he does his news, it's compelling, it's urgent. And I went, holy crap, this guy's good. He was really good. And you had to watch it when he comes on. He goes, there's a whole lot going every night. There's a whole lot going on. Well, it's the same stuff going on for all the channels. But this guy, told my wife, I said, this guy's going to be huge. And sure enough, within, I'd say 3 or 4 months, he was number 1. And if you watch him, and they did a lot of that. He was succinct, and he was excited to be on, and he was genuine. He was real, and you could just tell it. So people can sense that. When I was a kid, I think I'd say this in the movie. I actually had my mom drop me off when she went downtown to shop. I'd have her drop me off in front of WIFE, the local radio station in Indianapolis where we lived. And I'd stand there and I'd watch the DJ work. And I'd watch him. He'd go through the records and he'd pick up the phone. And I just knew there was some hot chick on that phone talking to him. and I would study the entire, I knew the control room, what it looked like before I was ever a disc jockey. I knew by the time I was 14 years old what the hell the control room looked like. And then one night we were going by there and I saw the night guy. He had a record playing and he went outside. He was bent down talking to these two girls in the car. And I said, well, I guess you can go outside. And what happens if he locks himself out? I thought about that. And he obviously he went back inside and finished it. There was no dead air, I guess. But I thought that was kind of cool. But anyway, I was a fanboy. And I think some of your better programmers in the country, like Guy Zapolian is an incredible guy here in America. He's a mastermind when it comes to programming, and he was a fanboy. He grew up saving the surveys from KHJ, and he was lucky because he grew up in Los Angeles, where one of the greatest radio stations in the history of broadcasting was KHJ. But he was a fanboy, and you can just feel things better if you grew up wanting to do that. You know what I mean, Ken?
The same way.
You got your fanboy stories, I'm sure.
I do.
Absolutely. So if we go back, so you created the Morning Zoo concept in Tampa. You blew it up at Z100. The Morning Zoo and Z100 maybe have been the most replicated and duplicated morning show concepts, I would say, in radio history, I guess. Is it possible for radio, do you think, to capture that type of magic again, to create something outstanding like this again? And if so, follow up, what does that, who does that in your opinion right now?
Well, in West Palm Beach, there's a morning show that's great. It's got like 4 characters, and it's basically based on the Morning Zoo, I would imagine, by listening to it. And it's funny because they just call it KBJ, and that's it. But conventional wisdom says, well, you got to say some people's names. No, it's just KBJ show. That's it. And it's interesting and it's compelling, and it's just it's a brand. I think authentic, interesting, compelling. And the other element, I think, the greatness is curiosity. You have to be curious. And I had, when we did the Morning Zoo in Tampa and in New York, we had people who did all that. They were authentic. They weren't so polished. They weren't professional. They were just fun. A lot of people that do radio forget about that word fun. And it's just, people like somebody who makes them smile. If you work in an office, there's always one character in there that said, where'd you get that dress? Where'd you get that jacket? Whoa, man, that's, just like some kind of comment. Doesn't have to be a joke. It can just be an observation. Some of the best stand-up comedians really don't write their comedies. They just pick a topic that happened in real life and they riff on it. So I think that's an element that a lot of people leave out of their broadcast day, and that is humor. Like I said, you don't have to have a joke. You can just be you being funny, and we all know people like that. I was lucky because when I was in Tampa, I had a great sidekick named Cleveland Wheeler. And we had like 4 people on the show at that time. Now, there were some other people. We had a guy up on a plane flying around. He wasn't very funny, but he didn't have to be. He was a pilot and a traffic guy. But it was neat. And we came to New York. We started with just 3 people. When we started, it was just me and a fellow named J.R. Nelson. But it's funny too, because in the control room, when we first went on, it wasn't finished yet. And I had to go get the other microphone from the production room, and we clamp it on the table. So And then when we got done, JR would take it back in the production room and clamp it back on that table. That's that. And I talked about it on the radio. We've only got one microphone in this place, and we had to borrow the one from the other room and bring it in. And we actually, and the other thing is, when you say KISS, keep it simple, talk simple. I would, if we had a new kid on the air, I'd call him a baby DJ. Got a baby DJ coming in here, so if he makes a mistake, it's okay, And when I selected personnel for the show, I wanted somebody who was compelling, someone who was authentic. I don't care about you being a great disc jockey. That wasn't important. That's not it. Be a great personality. And we all these people who are listening, obviously they like radio. And when they grew up, they had somebody that they liked on the radio. And I was telling Ken, one of our hosts today, about the fact that, I still run into people who grew up listening to me and remember what things that I did 45 years ago. I was reading an article with the singer Amy Grant, and they asked her about her past, and she said, what station did you listen to? She said, I grew up at WMAK, AM. I think we were at 1300, and with 250 night, 1000. Well, we were number one in Nashville. And she said, my favorite DJ was Super Shan. I about fell out. I went like, how the hell does Amy Grant know my name? She remembered my name from listening to me. And that's what I call leaving deep footprints. If you don't leave a deep footprint, your career is going to be short, especially these days. Don't be a great personality.
Man, that's a lot of great information just in that one question, Scott. Fantastic. Another ability I think you have, and probably better than
my answers, or we're going to be overtime.
Yeah, what about that preparation, concentration, moderation part we're coming up to? Never mind. All right, so I think one of the exceptional skills you have and is creating unique, distinctive radio brands. So let's put a few up on the screen here. Z100, the hot Rockin' flame Throwin Z100. Pirate Radio had this take no prisoners attitude. Welcome to the jungle. And even when you first got to PLJ and had to reposition it for a while, you came up with this MOJO concept. To me, these are high concept, attitudinal branding that, in my opinion, is sorely missing from radio today. So my question to you is there still a place for it?
No doubt about it. I mean, great radio, great personality, impactful radio still works. I mean, there's not much of it going on because, I was talking to one of the guys who I think is still on, Jim Ryan, and I said, it's such a shame because when we started in radio, programming was an art, and now it's a business. The actual general managers aren't even the managers anymore. They're sales managers because you got some clown that's overseeing, maybe not a clown, but you got people overseeing 5 or 6, 10, 20 radio stations. So because they're saving money on management, it's just so sad. But there are some great radio stations. There's some great companies still, not very many, but a few. And who do we have to thank for this mess? Bill Clinton. When he, am I right?
You and Ken, you can give you the hand on that one. Like I'll hear that from Ken like every other week. It's Bill Clinton's fault.
It was.
He admits it.
Because it was people who loved radio, not loved money. Now it's run by people that doesn't make any difference. Really, the ratings don't make much difference anymore. It's all about the money they can bring in. If they can whore the radio station, that's more important than the ratings. That's that simple. And it's sad. But Bill Clinton came in here and he said, well, anybody can own, 10 radio stations now or whatever it was. But it used to be you could have an AM and an FM, and they had pride, and the programmers. Remember when you first got in, Ken, it was important. That was an important job. But now you just, you open up your your laptop, and there's your music for the week and all that. And a lot of stations are like that. You really don't have much say so if you're a programmer. But there are some stations out there. I'm not going to name any names, but there are stations that still do it right, and companies that do it right. I don't think many of the big ones are, but I think that it's important to know that there's still some people out there who believe in great radio.
Yeah, sometimes we meet some of them, so I love the candor. So coming back to what Ken already teased, a few of my favorite, and I did some research a little bit on that at least. Scott Shannon's quotes are preparation, concentration, and moderation. Or in a big market, sound small. I think we heard about that when you started C100. In a small market, sound big. So obviously we heard about the second one, but why do you think preparation, concentration, moderation is such an important lesson or such an important quote of yours?
Well, if you look at any good broadcaster, they dedicate a lot of time to being great. I mean, you got to have two things. You got to have the desire, which is basically passion, and you have to be willing to work. I look at. I don't have a great voice. I don't have one of those big, deep radio voices. I don't have education. I never made it. I didn't graduate from high school, for God's sakes. I didn't set foot on a college campus till I emceed a Grateful Dead show at Vanderbilt University. But I had a passion, and then I realized I had to compensate for my lack of education by working harder. And, when I programmed almost all my stations, I was in the station 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day, believe it or not. And I'm not exaggerating that. When I did Z100, I get there at 4:30 in the morning, and I left at 6 p.m., 8 p.m. at night. And you have to work hard. So it's preparation. That's basically working hard. Anytime you see, like a great athlete, it's about preparation. There's natural talent. Don't get me wrong, but you have to work hard.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of natural talent out there, that's for sure. But yeah.
I saw a guy one time. He said, "Do you when Michael Jordan goes up for a shot, a layup or a jump shot, whatever, do you think for 1 minute he's thinking about, what's going to happen if I miss this?" Or Tiger Woods, if he's looking at a putt, you think he's going, "Oh my God, if I could win the Masters again, if I make this putt, I got to make it." No, they're concentrating on the execution of the shot, which is completely different than worrying about the ramifications of making it or missing it. They are thinking, I call it body discipline. They're doing the things they need to do instead of letting the outside elements mess you up. And
they're prepared for it, right? I mean, they're prepared because they tried and they trained so many times and so often. I read that Michael Jordan did like 1 million training shots or something over the course of 2 or 3 seasons.
But that teaches you to put all this other crap out of your mind. You have to prepare, then you have to concentrate, and then you have to moderate what you want to do. In other words, you can't sometimes I'll listen to, I don't usually air check myself, but if somebody sends me an air check, I want to listen to just hear what it sounded like back then. I freak out. Oh, Jesus, I could have done that break in half the time. What am I doing blabbing? Every so often, you have as a performer. I'm talking as a performer now, not as a program director, but as a broadcaster. You have to, whatever you think that and I'm going to tell them they're going to love my story. But no matter what, you can always shorten it up. You can always make it quicker. It can be just as good if it's half as long, maybe better. And that's what moderation is. And you have to, when I have a control room, you have to, I put that sign up in there so anyone that ever worked for me, they know that slogan. I didn't create that slogan. It was created by a guy named Ron Jacobs. who was the program director of KHJ in Los Angeles, which, you know, they definitely practice, you know, moderation.
And Scott, I think what you're saying too is it's a play to win spirit. And I get a sense that there's too many stations playing not to lose.
Yeah, that's another way to look at it. But I just really believe all these great stations start at the top. You know, you can't have a manager who doesn't give a damn and a program director who does. They don't get it. You have to, you know, we had a dedicated team. And when we did Z100, there were a lot of people there that never been involved in a winning team. They never been involved in a win. And it was so weird because when the ratings first came out, Z100, I'll never forget it. I noticed people had tears. The people who worked on, we had a staff of only about 35 people. Now they got 180 over there. But we had a small staff, and I said, oh, what are you crying about? This is where we're supposed to be, number one. And because I've been there before, and it dawned on me that all the people, some of the jocks had never been a part of a winning station before. Most of the salespeople hadn't been with Winner before, and all of a sudden they're on top. They were a part of the #1 radio station in the #1 market, and it took me a second to understand that. I said, "Well, everybody's here. Come on, this is how it works," you know. And the champagne was flowing, but it's important for everybody to be a part of it. I'm a big believer in listening to everybody on the staff. I call it WMBA, management by walking around. And you go around, you talk to people. Maybe I got the letters wrong there, but you know what I'm saying. You walk around. We had a little guy in a mail room, had to be like 78 years old, which at that time looked pretty old to me. And he was wonderful, and he would talk about, you know, things he liked on the show and all that. And I actually learned stuff from him. I learned from every single person. You got to talk to them. No, you can't. After they blew me out at Pirate Radio, I remember the few people that were left over from my administration told me they had a PD there now, and you couldn't talk to him because he closed his door. And he was in the room all day running the computer. He was on his computer. And I said, he doesn't talk to anybody? No. He sends out memos. You got to talk to people. You're not the only smart aleck. You're not the only intelligent person. You're not the only creative person in the damn building. Talk to the people. You know, I read this somewhere. If you're not the smartest people in the room, how was it? You heard that before, Ken?
Yeah.
If you're in a room with the smartest people, what is it?
If you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room.
Yeah. Right. That's it. Sorry, I didn't say I got the best memory, but that's exactly what I heard, and that's right. Surround yourself with people who want to be great. I think that's the lesson here. So someone would be more concise there.
I agree with you. Thanks for watching the Global Radio Ideas webinar today. We're with Scott Shannon, who I named Radio Goat. I got to admit, he was a little uncomfortable with that, but certainly in my mind, he was a great role model to me and influenced me for my entire career with all the great work he's done in his. So thank you for that, Scott. We've got lots of people watching today, as you know, from all over the world. We'll get to some questions at the end of the show, but we do have a few more things we want to check in with you about. And Scott, one thing is the music. I think most people watching are going to be surprised to hear this, but you're obsessed and meticulous when it comes to the music logs on your radio station. So much so that your music directors have told me, guys like Mike Preston, that you review the music log every single day. You send it back to the music director with notes and changes. And I just got to ask, why is that attention to detail on the music so important?
Well, in order to have a great radio station, you have to, there's so many different areas. You remember the old TV show, the Hollywood Squares?
Yeah, of course.
What I do is I set up the squares in front of me. Graphics, audio, personalities, music, and I work on each one. And I also talk to people who are experts who I think that I admire in those different areas, promotions. So you have to enlarge. In my head, I enlarge that box and I work on that one area for a day or two. I was very big on graphics. I want the people at the station to think we have a cool graphic and a memorable logo. The same thing for production. You want production, and you go back and you look, and I was talking to Ken the other day, and we talked about this. We talked about a station in Los Angeles that was very popular at the time, and people would come in from all over the world and try to record and copy some of the things going on in America, but almost all of them focused on Z100 for one reason. The production and the verbiage that we had on the air. I really believe that great radio stations are built on a freaking keyboard. You sit there. I come up with lines when I'm driving a lot, and I'll jot them down. I'll pull over and jot them down, and I'll have a piece of paper. If I'm in a restaurant, I'll write it down on a napkin. Just little things like, ways to showcase your advantages, ways to showcase the things that people will notice if they're listening to you, to your radio show. I remember when I was doing PLJ in New York, I used to open up the show with a harp just to get it going at 6 a.m. in the morning. And my partner's father lived up in Albany, Todd Pettingill's dad, and he was listening to us every morning to hear his son on the radio. And I remember him saying, "I'm in the harp club." That's what he said one day we were interviewing. "I'm in the harp club." Well, wait a minute. So I started the harp club. And that's, if you keep it simple and you talk in a way that people can relate to, so I see people all the time, they still, get email from, "I remember when you did that Whistle and Wind show." I had a lady, we had, I think she was maybe overweight and a little bit. And we would have her come to the studio, and we would give her $1,000 if she could whistle the song. She got to eat crackers first, and we'd have her come by once a week and try to whistle. "Come on now." And we would call it Whistle and Wind. You want to play Whistle and Wind, just little things like that. I had a sound effect called the Tukey Bird. And I think it was on an old cartoon, and I would just have it. When you hear a Tukey bird call, Tukey. Stupid things like that, people remember. Just if you have, if you ever been new to a school, you notice that some cliques all have their own vocabulary, cute little things. And when you first get involved, you don't understand what they're talking about. But when you become one of the people, one of the group, then you all say the same kind of things, silly little things that mean something. You follow me,
Yeah.
Ken?
I hear you all the time. In fact, we were having a conversation about this with some people last week about, people don't remember the perfectly executed radio station.
No, they don't.
They remember the fun things you do, the interesting things, the surprising things you do. And I think radio and audiences would benefit greatly from more risk taking.
Yeah, also, I think the audio branding is an important piece that you touched on here. And I think obviously, and I remember that when Ollie and I started in radio, there was this thing called California Air Check. and they would send you like CDs like to Germany. Like some guy in LA and New York recorded those, and they would send like CDs for like 150 marks, which is like, I don't know, $150 today. Like sent those CDs over with like breaks and stuff like from stations in LA and also obviously from Z100 in New York. And that like simple, like you said, that simple verbiage that you guys used, like said broadcasting from top of the world, like this big, powerful, simple verbiage, like stuck even with me while not living, never been in New York before as a 18, 19-year-old starting in audio production. So little different today, obviously, and a topic that I'm basically like meeting every other day is like young people, young audiences not listening to radio. And I see that with my kids like all the time. We touched on that before the show a little bit, Scott. Like it's all about YouTube, TikTok, the Gram, Fortnite, online PlayStation, Twitch, like all these things. So what do you think, what can radio do to attract? And that's a question Ken and I really like wrestle with in our daily lives often as well. If we consult or work with stations, like what do you think can radio do to attract young people in radio in 2024?
There's not a whole hell of a lot you can do. People do it all the time. I've seen stations try to shift their sound to appeal to younger people, and in the meantime, they lose their core. They lose their, the people they had 20, 35, 54 or whatever in that area. I just don't. I don't think it's wise to try to get them back. If you have a great radio station that is doing all the right things and playing the right music, you might increase it a little bit. But excellence always brings new people in, because a great radio station has a bigger circumference. It brings in people from the side. Outside the circle that you're not looking for, but you're so good that people talk about you and they want to see what's going on. And that's different. But I just don't think you're going to rip them away from TikTok and all the other choices that they have. I mean, I see a lot of people make the mistakes of going after them, and it doesn't work. I'm not saying you got to give up. Maybe somebody will come up with something. Like nighttime DJs used to be the second most important shift on the station, and it's just not anymore. Hardly anybody has a live DJ on anymore. I don't know what to recommend to do that. I think it's pretty much of a lost cause. It's just like Bill Clinton really screwed us, and we got to live with it. That's not going to turn around. People aren't going to go back to having 2 and 3 radio stations for an owner. That's not going to happen. And the kids, they don't care about it. Radio anymore. There's still got some, but it's not going to change much. I don't know what to tell you. It's difficult.
Yeah, it is. I don't think anybody has an answer. And some of our injuries we did to ourselves.
Oh yeah, there's a bunch of self-inflicted problems, but they're all based on money. They're all based on revenue, and that's what Clinton did. When hedge funds got involved, that was it. Bye-bye.
Right. So, Scott, about a year and a half ago, you stepped away from your morning show at CBS FM, but you're not retired. And we'll talk about some of the things you're doing a little later in the show. But you told me as we were preparing for this that you now see yourself today as a teacher and an inspirer, which is part of the reason why you took the day off from the golf course today to be on the show and share your wisdom with us. But let's if we had to narrow it down to maybe one lesson to share with the programmers on this webinar today, what would it be and why?
I think it would be passion. Follow your passion. Every person that I've ever worked with, every person that I've ever trained, every person that I've ever inspired shared one single trait, and that was a passion for what they do. And I think and one of the things that fellow who wrote that story about Worcester First, he said these startup campaigns, there's plenty of lessons for a lot of people in that movie. Now, that's not the reason we made it, but nevertheless, it's in there. You see what happened from by a group of people who were dedicated and passionate. It's just like, and I think I used the line in there, it's amazing what can be accomplished if people hire a passionate person and leave them alone. Leave them alone. People, can you hear me? Leave them alone. Let them do it. I remember when I got married, when I married my Trish, we had a honeymoon, and while I was gone, the guy who replaced me had a kidney stone. He got sick. He was in the hospital, and so I was off the air. Damn it, my dogs are barking. Can you hear them?
Yep, it's all fine.
See, authentic.
Better than being voice tracked.
So what happened was, it was the first time we weren't number one. So all of a sudden, here comes a whole crew from Cleveland, our home office, and they want to have a sit down with me. And I got another guy checking out, got a list of things. He was listening to the station, and we got to fix this, we got to fix that. And I remember I'm sitting there, and I'm in this meeting, and my face is red. I asked the owner, Mr. Maltz, I said, can you step over here with me for a minute out front? We were in a hotel room in Secaucus, in a hotel restaurant. I said, I need to talk to you for a minute. And I go over here, and I said, I'm going to take off right now because I've had enough of this meeting. See, where I'm from, you dance with the girl that you brought. and I'm the guy, I don't need all this crap. I said, you leave me alone and I'll fix it. I'm going back to the station. Bye-bye. And the next thing I know, our GM comes back. He said, what the hell did you say to the boss? I said, I just told him you got to dance with the girl that brought you. And he says, well, they all got on the plane and went back to Cleveland. and sure enough, in the next book, we were back on top, number one. But I think you have to hire the right people and leave them alone. I mean, how many program directors do you guys talk to that have no juice whatsoever in what goes on that radio station?
Yeah, there's quite a few. So
Andy's in there shaking that head of his. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, there's a couple. At least, like, yeah. It's a good excuse, at least, to phrase it that way. So let's do the next two ones a little bit more as a rapid fire. So biggest challenges you faced in your career, Scott? Like, they're really the most complicated situations you've been in, might be asking.
Complicated situations are usually generated in-house. I remember one time I was working as I was consulting a station in the company that I worked for when I was in Tampa, and we were flying into Houston to fix this station, to make some changes in it, and my boss was on the plane, and I said, we have to get rid of the manager. And I said, why do we have to get rid of the manager there? Why can't we just tell him what we're going to do? He says, Scott, believe it or not, there's some people in this business who would rather do it their way and lose as opposed to doing it your way and win. I never heard that. I couldn't even imagine there were people like that. Why would you not listen to somebody? And then later on, I found out that it was prevalent. It was prevalent in the business. And unfortunately, we got rid of the manager, and the station flourished, went to, I think, top 3 in the market.
Okay. Best and worst decisions you ever made.
The worst decision, I don't have a lot of regrets in my life.
That's good.
The best decision is taking a job in radio. When I was a kid, I remember I would go down, I would pedal my Schwinn down to the local record store, which was really Telstrum's Electronics. It was a store in Lawrence, Indiana, just outside of Indianapolis. I'd pedal down there, and I would take my money that I made from my paper route and from shagging golf balls at the golf course. I'd be out there because then they didn't have the automatic deals going. And I worked at a golf course, basically. And I would go in there and then I would, buy a couple of records and come back home. And I would really study the labels and everything on them. But I remember one thing, they had a magazine rack and they sold Billboard magazines. And I saw a picture of a disc jockey. And I'll never forget, it was in Fargo, North Dakota. Had a picture of him in a control room. He's all by himself. And being a very shy person when I was a kid, and still am at times in my adult life, I thought, man, that's a cool place to do it. Have a job. You're in the control room by yourself. Nobody can tell you what to do. You get to talk to people, but you don't have to look at them. I thought that was, that was a decision I made. I was going to be in radio. And I think that's the best decision. If you're looking for a day-to-day situation, I can't remember because I made as many mistakes as anybody else. But the thing about it is, when you realize you made a mistake, don't pursue it. Don't pursue that particular tunnel. Go ahead and say, I screwed up. I apologize. Let's go. And, get the hell out. Pivot, as they say now.
So Scott, one more question from us before we take some questions from the people watching today. So if you're watching, have a question, type it in the chat box. So Scott, as we were preparing this, we got some input from some other people about things they'd like to ask or talk about or know. And one question that came about was, in 2024, if you were to launch a new radio station, what would it look like if the Super Shannon, the Super Shannon, who we see on the screen,
the Super Shan, you mean?
I'm going to take you off the air right now, Ken.
Take a little water, exactly.
Yeah, we got to get you off the air. We'll be right back, folks.
We'll be right back. What would that radio station look like today?
In order to do it properly, you have to study the landscape of what's available to the listeners in that market. I'm not trying to get too technical, but you have to sit there. When I did Q105 in Tampa, I lived in the hotel at the airport, and I listened to the radio stations. I drove around, asked people, and I knew, and I would make notes to figure out where we wanted to put that station. When I came to Tampa, they had fallen from grace. They went from number 1 down to like number 14 because Bill Tanner, who was a very, very talented program director from Miami at that time, Y100, he was brought in and he put a new station on the air, and it was targeted at female pop music, female top 40 listeners. In the meantime, Q105 at that time was a rock 40. It was a top 40 station, but it leaned rock. It didn't play much urban music whatsoever. And then I also listened to the landscape, and I realized, I realized that there was not a dominant top 40 radio morning show in the market. So I thought, well, I better come up with a good morning show. And they had a pretty good morning guy who he thought I was going to fire him. I said, no, I've never done mornings before, so I need somebody to hold my hand, and you're it if you want the job. But you don't have to take the job. And he took the job, and it worked out pretty well. But I think you have to go and see what's available. And I also go back and I look what has been already. See what has been successful in that market. And then you got to create a new station that people talk about. It's got to be bold and simple. And it's got to be memorable. If you look back at the history of Scott Shannon and some of the DJs that have been a part of his success, there's names like Hollywood Hamilton, Magic Matt Allen, Cat Simon, Jack the Whack, Janet from Another Planet. names the listeners remember. And sometimes I go like this, well, the more boring the personality, the bigger name I better give them. And I had a guy, and I said, I'm going to give you a name, and I want you to create the person behind that name. And he came to Nashville from Chattanooga, and I named him Coyote McCloud. And I want you to be Coyote McCloud. What does that say to you? And I had sessions with him to see what he was going to do. You know, it's a fast talking, funny guy, but it was, not a screamer, but definitely an energetic thing. And he went on to become a number one personality. And he stayed in that market for many, many years. And he graduated to morning radio as Coyote McCloud. I like to magnify the personalities. It's very difficult to have a winning radio station without personalities that they can relate to and remember. That's important. You look at some of the stations that exist in London, and you look at how much money they pay those people. The morning shows now, they're attracting TV personalities to do radio. And those shows are awesome over there now. They spend more money and on more talent than I think here in America now.
Yeah, I think you're probably right in most cases. So let's get to a couple of questions. We're coming up on nearly the 1 hour mark. This has been absolutely fantastic. I've enjoyed every second of it and so much outstanding advice and information. First question comes from Ross Winters in Canada. What's the best contest you were ever involved with? And then the birthday game, ?
Yeah, that's it. He nailed it. You don't need me, Ross. You got it. It was brought to me, and I'm a big believer in, if you're going to do a project and you're going to explain it to somebody, by the time you get off the elevator, he probably already should understand it. If you can't figure it out in an elevator ride, it's not going to work. And I had these guys come to me from Nashville, and we have an idea. What is it? It's called the birthday contest. Everybody's got a birthday. And that turned out to be one of the biggest radio contests. We were the first station to do it, and I wrote all the copy for it. They had the idea that they had that really was a component of that was a blockade of the TV spots. Every Thursday, they would run, they would blockade. If you were watching TV, you heard about the Z100 birthday contest. Hi, I'm Scott Shannon. I have an envelope here. If your name's in this envelope, I'm Scott Shannon. This is an envelope. We got a birth date in here. If it's your birthday and you're the right caller, you win $10,000. And we did the TV spots over and over and over. And that's another request. Somebody's got a question. But the birthday contest was very, very effective. And that came after we had been number one for a few years in New York. And that reignited the whole thing. I had a great partner in Film House, and they basically owned the thing. But they gave us a good deal if I helped them write it and execute it. So the answer, Mr. Canada, is you're right, the birthday contest.
So question from Warren. To me, pirate radio, is what he's saying, was one of the greatest sounding stations ever launched. Why do you think, Scott, it never really won over the LA market?
Well, we did have ratings. We basically focused on the valley, the Fernando Valley. Fernando, yeah, that it. Anyway, it didn't work because there was some. It was a lot of it was internal. There was some ownership problems, and let's just say it. I don't know what to say. It just didn't work. Number one, we ran out of music. Guns N' Roses didn't do another album for a couple of years. And the other thing is we wanted to move it to a more top 40 area. That's what the ownership wish was, to compete against KISS. instead of staying in our lane. And there are some other problems. The biggest problem was they overpaid for the radio signal and the talent. So, and the bank said, yeah, you got to go. So,
well, a little homework I did on Pirate is first book. It went from 14th to 3rd in Los Angeles, which is still very impressive.
Yeah, we had plenty of numbers. We actually beat D's in the last book we had there, but most of our listeners were outside of the LA proper, because it wasn't a Spanish directed format. It was just rock and roll and long haired rock at the time. Guns N' Roses, that was it. We were playing groups that no one ever heard of, and after we got through playing them, no one ever heard of them again. Yeah.
So, Scott, next question is from Ireland. It says, what does Scott think of the trend of hiring influencers from social media, TV, and those who do not understand or have a passion for radio?
They have a passion for celebrityhood, and you can use them in a certain as a part of a morning show, but they shouldn't be the basis of the morning show. It depends on the individual too. A lot of these people have inflated opinions of their abilities, and that has been a management problem that I've seen. I didn't experience myself, but I do know that they think they want to base the whole show around them because their little show that they have on the internet is successful. But no, if you use them in the proper fashion, I think they can be very helpful.
I agree. I think can also be a strategy. Like if you want one for like trying to get gaining importance for younger audiences, because that's definitely the people like kids and younger audience look up to. So do you want to take another one? So there's a question from Scott. And a question for Scott from Tony Home. I'm an ex-morning guy from the UK, did 25 years. For most of these years, I was always trying to get to the next level. I think about year 22, I thought I've nothing left. How after C100 did you approach that? Presumably thinking somehow I got to top that. Did you think you had to top C100 when you left?
Not really, no. I realized that was the right place, the right time. And there was a lot of luck involved. I mean, I did a good job. Don't misunderstand me, and I'm proud of it. But I did just as good a job in Tampa. If you grew up in Tampa during that era, you know the impact of Q105. It didn't have the pizzazz, the panache as Z100 had, and it didn't get copied all around the world. For those who don't know, when Billboard magazine did a whole article on Z100, and they found out that it had been copied in one way or another all around the world, and it was just incredible. Here's a guy who just loves radio, basically a fanboy of radio. And the next thing I know, they're flying me into Chicago to be on Oprah 2 or 3 times. And then we were on Good Morning America and then inside the big page in Newsweek magazine and all the awards and interviews. It was mind boggling to me. But what I had to tell myself, they did a front page article of like a 7-page article in New York Magazine. I had to sit for that. I was like, can you make this a little faster? I got to go home. But I realized that that's part of my job. I didn't look at it that way because it never hit me like that. But in Tampa, it was, we did TV interviews. I'm not trying to be like a loco yoko, but we did but not like New York. There's nothing, there was I'll give you a good example. We had a fellow on the show who was way out of the demo, Jonathan B. Bell. John Bell, and I gave him the Jonathan B. Bell to give him a little, push there. And I enjoyed him because he knew the area. He knew more than I knew about the area. Plus, he had a great personality. And so I like to have a reason for somebody. I just don't like to have somebody on the show. What do they do? Is he a sports guy? Is he a traffic guy? Is he the news guy? So we made him the vice president of promotion. He was in charge of all, a vice president of public service. That's what it was. Vice president of public service. And I had this goofy jingle made for him. And I said, I broke the news to him. We used to use this instrumental track called Alley Cat. And now it would take about 2 minutes at the end of the show. Here's Jonathan B. Bell with the world famous, incredible. He's the vice president of public service. And all he would read about a couple of carnivals happening around the tri-state area. And, the fight for MDA is going on and you can contribute and all that. And we'd all applaud like, oh, right, there's the community bulletin board, the Jonathan B. Bell award-winning community bulletin board. So we had it. So at one point, we decided I was going to get him a jingle. I got big news for you. We're going to get you a jingle. You're going to have your very own radio jingle. So I said, oh man, that's great. So we had a Jonathan B. Bell official bulletin board jingle listening party. So we got a big restaurant in New Jersey, and you had to win tickets. And you got a free copy of the new Jonathan B. Bell jingle, and you got to be there for the world premiere of the jingle in the restaurant. And so people were, can you get me some tickets for that, man? I need some tickets for the Bell thing. So then we did that. So it became a staple of the show, the Jonathan B. Bell. We used an old-fashioned type of radio jingle, not the kind we had on. It was about 30 seconds long. And John Wolfert, who does the jingles at Jam, he called me one day and said, you won't believe this. I'm doing the Z100 jingle package for a station in Montreal, and they want the Jonathan B. Bell Community Bulletin Board jingle as a part of it. So they were going to such extents to copy the morning show that they had a guy, the community bulletin board guy, on their station, and they wanted the jingle to go with it, except it was in French. So we played it in French. He sent me a copy of it. So, but that was the impact that this station had on a world, international level.
So it couldn't get any bigger from there. So yeah, I think it's a wonderful.
Yeah, I just wanted to work. I wasn't concerned. I just wanted to do what I do. That's what I do. I do what I do.
And you did it well. Scott, thank you so much for today. It's been a fascinating and incredible hour. Wish you could have you on all day. We could have gone on all day. I know that. So
I'm here. I'm not playing today. I could do it.
Well, you're welcome to come back anytime you want. But hey, if people want to hang on, we could certainly do a little overtime and get to a few more questions.
I don't mind. I'm here.
All right. Well, let's do that. For those that might have to run or tuned in late or had to leave early, the video is going to be posted tomorrow afternoon at P1 Media Group, the Global Radio Ideas webinar page on YouTube, and of course, all our social channels. So certainly advise watching it again and taking some notes, because there's some stuff here that we could all benefit from in our programming and on your careers. So thank you.
By the way, I should mention that movie that you were talking about is available on Amazon Prime. I went to just to check it last night to make sure. And if you have Amazon Prime, which I do, thank God for my wife. Every time I turn around, there's another box at the front door. But if you have Amazon Prime, it's free. I don't know how that happened, but it is. And it's also available on, you can get it on Apple TV. So it's on.
I get my $13 back now?
Nope, you don't. You're done.
It was well worth it.
And we've also got the Worldwide Radio Network, the True Oldies channel. You can hear it. Just go to True Oldies. Just tell Alexa, play the True Oldies channel on iHeartRadio. That's all you got to do.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's not available on, I can show you that. It's geo-blocked in Germany. So you sadly can't watch Worst to First, the true story of Z100.
Yeah, you can buy it on Apple TV, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But Amazon Prime is sadly not working here.
Okay, well, let's find a few more questions here. I know there's a few in here. Let me just go find them in this list today.
I've long felt you cannot fake authenticity, says Bobby Duncan. Would like to hear your thoughts. I mean, you can't fake authenticity.
What did he say? I think what? I've seen people. I've developed people who didn't have personality. I had a guy in Atlanta, Georgia, once on WQXI, and he was doing the afternoon show. And great disc jockey, great voice, great delivery, very hard worker, and no one knew who he was. So I met with him and I said, we got a problem here. I'm the new program director and I'm going to do afternoon drive. And he said, well, that's what I do. I said, well, that's the problem I'm talking about. That's the shift I'm going to do. He said, well, what am I going to do? I said, well, how would you like to do middays? He said, well, I guess if it's that or the road. I said, yep. I said, we're going to start a new show. He said, what do you mean a new show? I said, you're going to have a different name. You're going to be, his name was John Leader. And he went on to work at Radio and Records. It was a great voiceover guy out in California. So I changed I said, from now on, you're going to be the music professor. Dr. John, the music professor, no more Leader. And he says, well, they all know me. And I said, that's okay. They'll figure it out. Dr. John, the music professor, and you'll do some trivia, a trivia question here for $100 and here and there. And I said, talk about the music. I want you to talk about the music some. So he was kind of stubborn. 2 weeks later, he came into my office just before I went on the air. And he said, you won't believe this. I'm getting people welcoming me to Atlanta. I've been on the air here for 2 years and they don't know me. They love this new disc jockey that's in here. It just was kind of funny. He said, yeah, they think I'm new. They welcome me to the town and I love your show. Thank you. I've never had anybody like that before. So it was just kind of funny how you can make somebody authentic to a certain point. I mean, because he loved music. He just wasn't allowed to talk about it on the radio. And I said, you have to talk about it now. I want you to talk, don't jibber jabber too long. Don't jaw jack, as I like to call it, too long. But make it interesting, compelling, and let it go.
But you kind of embraced his authenticity on music then. So you didn't fake it. I mean, you embraced it.
No, I love music. I mean, I was one of the very first subscribers ever to Rolling Stone magazine when I was Super Shan on the air down in Mobile, Alabama. I heard about it and I got the address and I sent him a note and said, I'd like to subscribe. Do you have subscriptions? And I still have the very first edition of Rolling Stone magazine in my collection. It's got a picture of John Lennon on the cover. Wow. But I mean, I always like to know about the music that I'm playing. I was always into, new music. I love, listen to songs and would take chances a lot. I was very popular with the record companies because if I liked it, I would play it and give it a shot. And I got lucky. A lot of them were hits and some of them weren't. So I guess that's a mistake. But as long as you don't let it hurt you, you don't keep banging away at it. You play it for 2 weeks. You don't see any response, get off of it.
Yeah, and there's very few people taking chances like that today.
Oh no, you can't do that today unless you don't have somebody looking over your shoulder, telling you what to do.
So let's talk another question here about radio. Certainly our reach and cume has maintained itself fairly well, but we continue to lose time spent listening to radio. So the question here from Jacob is that, probably mostly due to multiple options people now have, but what can radio do to combat this loss?
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. There's so many more distractions now and other places to go. And that's why when you say, somebody asked you, is there ever going to be another Z100? Not to that magnitude, I don't believe. But there's going to be new stations that catch people's ears and eyes. It's going to happen. If you want people to listen longer, be better. That's the secret. You have to be more intense and be better. One of the things that I think I told you when we were prepping for this, I've always been a celebrator. I believe in celebrations. And you want to make as many days as you can. You can't do it every day because it wears out. But I believe in celebration. Have something to celebrate. Like when I think I mentioned this earlier. I mentioned we celebrated my 5-year anniversary at CBS FM with a big party, and always find something to celebrate. I was talking about Jim Kerr, the great disc jockey here in New York. He was spent his 50th anniversary, and they had a big, huge celebration, which they should have, and they had all these celebrities call in. I did a quick interview with him, and Howard Stern did like an hour with him, and that went through the roof, and it was just part of his celebration of his 50th anniversary in New York. That's what I'm talking about. If you want to try to increase your time spent listening, you have to work on your sound. You have to work on your radio and your I guess the word is compelling. They have to listen. A lot of stations, they don't change anything. They don't change the production. They don't change the contest. If they have a contest, there's nothing new to listen for. It's the same songs over and over, and you can't get away from that. Even if you're like my station, oldie station, you still have to try to freshen it up with new liners. And even if it's a small thing, a contest where we're taking your opinion on blah, 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 there's a couple of morning show consultants that specialize in finding things for you to discuss and finding things for you to celebrate. So if you work harder to make your station fresher, that is one avenue I would take to try to get the time spent listening up.
I always love the quote, be predictably unpredictable.
Perfect. Yeah.
And I think way too many stations are focused on the predictable, but as we spoke about earlier, it's the unpredictability that makes the station special, shine, and memorable.
When we add, what I do is I try to add new titles to my oldie station. We for your information, we play the 60s and 70s, and there's no new music. But what we try to do is take some titles that we haven't played for a while and put them back in and rotate them. And people actually recognize. I get P1 feedback. Hey, that's really nice. You put in the John Denver's. We like it when you change, add new songs to your playlist, and that's important. But if they notice those little things, they certainly are going to notice if you have a new top of the hour. Get your production fresh. Get something going on. It doesn't have to be a money contest. Get something happening where you're talking a lot about something it's new. Don't do the same damn thing every day for months on end.
We agree with you, Scott. We've got the URL up there if you want to sample his True Oldies channel. It's a kind of a passion project for you. Been doing it for a lot of years. And I got to say, I was listening Sunday, was very, very impressed that, and Scott and I spoke on Sunday, and I said, man, I was listening this morning, and you were talking about the person that won the $1 billion lottery ticket the night before. And you told me you're cutting voice tracks for this radio station 7 days a week, which I commend you on, and it's remarkable and demonstrates your passion that you're still doing this every day, and I love it.
Yeah, we also rode Caitlin Clark pretty hard, had plenty, a lot of her background. There was somebody who shot 100 free throws every day. That's somebody, who worked hard to become successful. And like and certainly a role model for young girls.
So let's take one more question. This comes from a guy named Lee Jackson watching in the UK. How can commercial radio stations sound bigger than they are and be attractive to listeners on a decreasing budget?
Well, I would go back. Who's it from?
Lee Jackson in the UK.
Lee. All right, Lee. I would go with the line that I gave you earlier, if you happen to be listening. Great radio stations are built on keyboards. You have to write the production, or you might even come up with some things for the jocks to talk about, but get the keyboard going. My wife's always kind of like poking fun of me because I spend a lot of time on TikTok. Well, TikTok is not all kids. People like to think it's all about kids, but it's not. And if it is about just kids, they're pretty damn sharp. I learned all kinds of new things off of TikTok, new songs and which songs are coming back. And you know what they do on TikTok? They bring back like a new version of Islands in the Stream, or they've got different dances. There's different lists. There's different comments. Now, I'm not just saying TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever you want to do, but reach out and get out of your, get your vocabulary scrambled up a little bit. Find out what else is going on in the world. People are very afraid to get out of the box. It's the same thing all the time. And I really look in different places I'm very curious. I would say up your curiosity level and once again, go back to the keyboard and listen to the way other people talk, other words that are buzzwords that you want to throw in there, that you want to write into your production elements. I think radio production it's such an incredible way to increase the interest in your radio station and to give it a daily new feel.
So I think we'll wrap up here with a comment from Michael Buckley, who says, it's an honor to hear a real radio guy with radio flowing through his veins who can program, entertain, knows the music in his audience. You can and have done it all, Scott. Thanks for the hours of entertainment and companionship.
Well, he's exactly right. Radio runs through my veins. I love it. I've loved it since I was a kid. My love for it has not lessened any over the years. I'm not sure somebody will hire, a guy my age to do mornings again, but if I can do it, I will. I'm not.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I still enjoy, I do the True Oldies channel, but live radio is in my blood. I could program a station today as well as I did at Z100. It's a different landscape. It won't have the same effect. I know that because there's a lot of distractions going on, but I can certainly make one better than it is now. Let's put it that way.
Well, look, there is no doubt in my mind you can do it. And I think a lot of us are hoping you have the opportunity to do it because we've all learned from you over the years.
Absolutely.
All have admired you, and the deep footprint that you talked about earlier that you personally have left on the industry is immeasurable.
Well, Andy, thank you so much for allowing me to be on here. And Ken, great finally meeting you and talking to you about radio. I love your passion and hope to see you soon and talk to you.
Yeah.
Scott, thank you so much.
Anytime you want to come on, we'll make room for you, Scott. It's a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. So again, if you guys are looking for this, this will be available tomorrow on all our social channels and at the P1 Media Group room. And that's it. Great webinar. Thanks everybody for watching today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
And we're back next month with another amazing guest.
But Ken, I don't know what we should do after this. So we definitely need to think it's going to be like really tricky to think about that. So more than 700 people registered for that. More than 150 watched. Sadly, Scott, it's just like I'm gone. But I was a real pleasure, even for me being so far away. I knew of Scott Shannon and like the legacy like he built in U.S. radio. I think it was fantastic one. And I know, Ken, you've been working so super hard on getting Scott on for 2.5 years, though.
Yeah, I'm glad he did it.
Thanks from my end for making that possible and doing all these things, Ken. Like, I truly appreciate that I can be a part of this great thing that you like put so brilliantly together every time.
You're welcome. And anybody still watching, if any have ideas for the show or guest, please let us know. We'll